Welcome back, everyone. Here we are for back to our weekly conversations of CHIWORK, the Symposium on Human-Computer Interaction for Work. And this is the second year of CHIWORK. This is a new symposium that was born as a result of a series of conversations that Andrew and I started in the beginning of COVID and ran since April 2020. It started with organizers Linda Boyle, Joan Lee, and Rafaela Sadun. And now we transition into a new structure of conversations with a technical program committee and fantastic volunteers. The conversation had been a great success to kind of bringing people together to meet on a weekly basis. And we hope that we will kind of recreate this community of people coming together to discuss human-computer interaction for the future of work. As I mentioned, we're moving into a new structure. This is a second year of a symposium structure. So we have a fantastic group of volunteers, and maybe Andrew can share the screen to show our new beautiful website. Thank you, Isabel, and show our list of volunteers for this year. Great, and the link is also in the chat. So here is the fantastic technical program chairs and our excellent web video and accessibility volunteers. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, bringing us together. And our goal is to have about 20 conversations this fall. We will meet on a weekly basis. We will have guests coming. If your field of research is within the scope, feel free to propose to become part of our technical program. So we will share a link to a form in the chat, and you can nominate yourself or nominate other speakers in the chat. Okay, so Andrew, if you can put that link, that would be great.
It'll take me a moment, but yes.
Okay, excellent. So just a reminder, the format is going to remain about 30 minutes of recorded conversation, followed by 30 minutes of informal conversation. And as I mentioned, we will have talks announced and coming throughout the year. I'm going to ask Andrew to introduce our outstanding technical program committee. But just before we're moving on into the program part, I'd like to acknowledge the generous support that we received from the National Science Foundation for this. Andrew, would you like to introduce our technical program committee?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just thrilled. We have distinguished members of our community who've generously agreed to serve as technical program chairs. So thank you for that. So I'll go in alphabetical order. So Naveena Karusala is a postdoctoral fellow at the Harvard Center for Research on Computation and Society. Naveena's research is at the intersection of care, labor, and emerging technologies, spanning domains such as health, safety, and social work. Naveena's work looks at how technologies are shaping futures of care work, particularly in the global South, and asks how we might center care and care workers as the organizing principle of socio-technical systems. Naveena's research contributes to the fields of human-computer interaction and information and communication technologies and development. Toby Li is an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Notre Dame, where he directs the Sandwich Lab. He works at the intersection of HCI, AI, and end-user software engineering. And here he uses human-centered methods to design, build, and study interactive systems to empower end users and novice programmers to create, to configure, and to extend AI-powered computing systems. Shadon Sadagian, who's unable to join us today, but is serving on the technical program committee, is a postdoc researcher in the Department of Ubiquitous Design and Experience and Interaction, led by Professor Mark Hassensal at the University of Siegen. And her research focuses on designing user experience and interaction with automated systems such as robots, AI-based systems, and automated vehicles. She investigates approaches that balance pragmatic, performance-oriented as well as hedonic, experience-oriented qualities of interacting with automation. Erin Solovey is Associate Professor of Computer Science at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute. One area of Erin's research is next-generation interaction techniques such as brain-computer interfaces, physiological computing, and reality-based interaction. Erin designs, builds, and evaluates interactive computing systems that use machine learning approaches to adapt and to support the user's changing cognitive state and context. Erin also investigates novel paradigms for designing with accessibility in mind, particularly for the deaf community. Erin's work has applications in areas such as education, transportation, medicine, creativity support, gaming, and complex decision-making. Max Wilson is an associate professor at the University of Nottingham in the Mixed Reality Lab. Along with his brain data team, Max focuses on understanding and measuring mental workload experiences in HCI, both through qualitative engagements with people and quantitatively using brain measures, primarily functional near-infrared spectroscopy, FNIRS. Given the emergence of consumer brain devices to help you meditate and focus, Max is studying the cognitive future of work, where such mental workload data is likely to become a form of personal data. In our community, Max is a deputy editor for IJHCS and also serves on the CHI steering committee. So thank you all for leading the technical program for CHIWORK for the coming year.
Great, thank you. We have such a kind of exciting group. So we're going to start today by asking each of our technical program committee members to give their own take into the future of work. What are some of the urgent issues? What are some of the pressing topics to discuss? So I'm going to start alphabetically with Naveena. Go ahead, Naveena.
Thank you, Erin and Andrew. Yeah, so I think the idea that has really informed my thinking on the future of work is simply that workers know what decent work feels like. So after decades of eroding standards and opportunities for decent work, there's been increasing protests and workplace organizing and mutual aid efforts. And so I think the future of work is already being fought for by workers, and the path forward to me centers around approaching our research with feminist concerns of care and solidarity and political engagement. And to describe what I mean by those, I think the idea of care or thinking about care work, regardless of the kind of work that we're looking at, helps us diversify the kinds of work we look at. And I think, CHIWORK and HCI has really been great at this in general. For example, helping us build a vocabulary for naming something as work, like the unpaid caregiving work of parents, and also diversifying the concerns related to the workplace. So it's also about healthcare, connectivity, or food security, or mobility. And then I think solidarity has, really centers supporting workers' organizing efforts and their understanding of emerging technologies, and also recognizing that technology is not always the most immediate thing that workers care about in their efforts. And also understanding when working alongside workers, thinking about the relationships among different workers, as well as hierarchies and even divisions across geographies. So transnational flows of labor as well. And then also locating ourselves as workers and what sorts of working conditions we are under or contributing to academia. And then lastly, I think centering political engagement is something that we can also work on as a field. I think we have the ability to reframe the political possibilities of technology and work. I'm thinking of so once I was providing testimony on why we should ban facial recognition in public spaces in Washington State, and policymakers asked, isn't AI inevitable? Don't we have to figure out how to work with it eventually? And I think we should absolutely ensure that, governance is keeping up with emerging technologies. But I think we also have, more options. We can refuse certain technologies that rely on harmful assumptions. We can argue for resources to go into non-tech efforts. And I think these are all aspects of the future of work conversation that we can be having within HCI.
Great, thank you, Naveena. We'll move on to Toby.
Sure. So for me, I think one really important aspect of future of work is how can we focus on empowering individual workers instead of benefiting the large organizations and large corporations? Because if we look at the state of the world today, you can see that the deployment of AI in work context is becoming more and more widespread and more ubiquitous. However, we're also seeing that the widening data divide and the technology divide, which contributes to the widening AI inequality. Because currently, if we look at the current paradigm of how AI is deployed in the work context, in most cases, those AI are owned by a small group, the corporates, the big organizations, and the collected data is also owned by those groups. So therefore, the use of AI, the utility of using AI, the increased productivity as a result of deploying AI, basically goes to that small group instead of benefiting all the workers. So I think a really important research agenda is that we want to democratize the AI for work. So AI can truly empower all the individual workers and can benefit all of them. So we want to enable all the workers to own their AI and have their AI work for their own individual preferences and their own individual objectives, which can be really diverse. Like for example, one typical domain in this challenge that I've been working on is rideshare, because we're seeing that all the data produced by rideshare and all the AI techniques for dispatching, for pricing, are controlled by the platform. And as a result, they all work in the best interest of the platform. Because typically, if you look at this domain, like platforms are supposed to take merely an intermediate role that basically try to match providers, which are drivers, with the demand, which are the riders. But in fact, we're seeing that utilizing the data collected from all the drivers and all the riders and all the complex AI algorithms, the platforms are now in the business of basically predicting the lowest price that drivers would accept and predicting the highest price that the riders will accept. And as a result, the platform itself has become bigger and bigger in this dynamic, while taking all the benefits from the AI as a data-driven technology, but the actual drivers and the riders don't really benefit from it. And I think this is not only true for domains like rideshare, but also for what we consider as knowledge work, such as data science, programming, or design. So I think it is tremendously important for us as researchers to focus our work on empowering end users and give the ownership and give the benefit of AI back to the end users.
Thank you, Toby. And let's move on to Erin.
Okay, hello everyone. Yeah, it's great to hear your takes, Naveena and Toby. And building on this, I mean, we're clearly seeing that things, autonomy, AI, robotics, and intelligence are becoming integrated into work in many different areas across very diverse domains. And this means that algorithms and data are taking on tasks that had been previously done by human workers. And this is both physical tasks and cognitive tasks. And we're already becoming accustomed to this, and next generation will expect this. I mean, my kids already expect things to autocomplete and things like that. However, all these algorithms are inherently brittle, and the reliance and trust in these systems need to be appropriately calibrated to the actual capabilities and limitations. And understanding how to effectively work with, as well as design, build, and govern these powerful yet imperfect tools is important. In addition, we've seen growing increases in measuring and inferring aspects of human performance and cognition with the goal of optimizing our productivity and accelerating learning and improving our wellness. So it has positive possibilities, but it can also be fragile and needs to be done carefully. And then another trend that we've seen just more recently is that there's less and less separation between our work life and our non-work life, and less boundaries. And we've seen positive aspects of this because there's more acceptance and understanding of the individual worker, their unique needs, whether it's related to health or family, disability. And the hope is that this will continue and we can be accepting of our individual needs and our coworkers' individual needs. However, it's also made us vulnerable when the workplace isn't accepting. So these are some of the things I'm thinking about, among others too. I'll stop there.
Great. And I'm going to call on Max last.
Hey, everyone. So for me, it's a kind of like a cognitive lens over quite a few of those issues that I've been thinking about for a while. And Erin mentioned exactly that kind of point, that there's machines or algorithms trying to figure out a bit about maybe cognitive state or our current potential, and then maybe organize work around us, maybe decide that you should be doing these tasks and should be doing these other tasks. And so many forms of work are becoming more cognitively challenging, that it's becoming increasingly important to kind of consider what that is as the primary resource we can allocate and manage. So things like physical work are getting more automated, and those physical tasks are becoming more kind of monitoring tasks maybe, or organization tasks. And even work that was already, mainly cognitive, like kind of office work or knowledge worker work, is becoming more fragmented, more dividing into life, as Erin mentioned. And so there's things like micro productivity was a thing where we'd be able to work for 4 minutes quickly while we're at the bus stop to achieve some tasks. All of these to me add up to a kind of a life where what we want to do is understand ourselves a bit more in terms of cognitive ability, mental workload that we have available. So I kind of see this as a type of personal data that we will either want to measure about ourselves, and technology will help us do that, or it's the kind of thing that workplaces will become increasingly concerned about if they're not already. There's companies that already have small EEG devices in employee helmets, and then there's also companies that I've been working with now who are dedicated to helping other companies manage the cognitive abilities of their employees. So both of those things are quite scary. But my slightly controversial view is that measuring that, like our mental workload limits or abilities or current usage, whatever that will be, is probably more important than measuring stress, because if you can measure the cause of the situation and help us to manage it, then measuring the symptom becomes less of an issue. So I'm intrigued what all of this will mean for the future of work when we are either trying to optimize ourselves, improve ourselves, or have people threatening to maybe measure them about us and use that to their advantage to control us.
Thank you all. So one thing we wanted to do is to open this up to questions, audience questions, and I'll start with those questions in a moment. But if you have a question, then one way to go about this is to type something in the chat, and we will call on you to ask a question, or we're happy to read that question. But I guess one thing I'm sort of curious about what the members of the technical program committee think is, what are some of those burning issues in the future of work? And additionally, I'm kind of curious, we mentioned different topics that might, different jobs that are sort of prime targets. And I'm kind of curious if you have, if you had to name one job, or if you have to name, I don't know, two, right? What are those jobs where, the future of work and our thinking is really, we're right there and we need to, we can do something right away. So I'm not sure who would like to start with that. We can again go with alphabetical order maybe, or Naveena, do you want to start? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, no. I think, when you ask that question about, what are the areas that are really pressing right now, my work has been in healthcare and looking at labor in healthcare, and I think, just the proliferation of, for example, like AI in healthcare has just been huge. And one thing that I've been really curious about is kind of understanding the situated realities of governance of those technologies across the world. So in different geographic and cultural and national political contexts, like what that looks like. So, when we say, there should be democratic ownership of workplace technologies, or, there should be community-based data stewardship, what does that actually look like? given, say, like decentralized workers, or, big power differentials within the workplace. So I'm really curious about the actual implementation of some of these ideas, these theoretical ideas, around governance of emerging technologies.
Thank you. Toby, would you like to go next? Burning issues?
Sure. So I think one burning issue is really on the workforce development. And by saying workforce development, I don't mean teaching everyone to write code. Because, we have put a lot of efforts in CS education, a lot of efforts in making programming tools easier to use. And I think we should continue to put in more effort, and more people will learn how to write code. But realistically, I'm not envisioning a future where everyone can write code. But I think everyone should learn how to work with their like AI partner. Like, for example, everyone should understand that machine learning models have limitations. Machine learning models have biases. Biases can come from training data. Everyone should learn a skill of how you can validate results generated by different AI models. How can you repair the results generated by AI models? How you can have a more accurate mental model of the AI's capabilities by interacting with them. What are some strengths or weaknesses of AI systems? Or when you work with, let's say, models like GPT-3, what are some effective strategies for coming up with prompts? Or what are some strategies for curating the results generated by those AI models? And so when I look at this, it's an entire spectrum, right? On one side of a spectrum, we have really the capability of communicating with the computer in the computer's language, that's programming. And on the other end, we have the capability of collaborating with your human coworkers in a workspace. And that's something we kind of expect most workers to have. And I think there's an entire spectrum in between, right? The one part of the effort is that we make the intelligence systems easier and easier to use, or we make the way of how someone can interact with a system closer and closer to how they can interact with their human coworkers. But on the other hand, I think we also need to bring up within people's skill, not necessarily to a point where they can communicate with computers in the computer's language, but at least they can get used to and aware of the unique styles or the unique characteristics of how their computer coworkers work with them.
Very interesting. Thank you. Erin, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, one of my burning questions has been your other question, which is what we actually mean by the future of work. Work is so diverse and global. It can mean many different things. And so this is something I have been thinking about as this term keeps coming up everywhere. How do we study future of work as a field when it can mean so many different things to different people? As has come up, we hear about it, AI being integrated into medicine, but it's being integrated there's very few areas though that it hasn't touched or that it won't touch. So I think it's true, and related to what Toby was saying, that people need to understand, where it does have strengths. It does make, there are some reasons that we can do our work better because of it, but we have to understand where those strengths and weaknesses are. And I think that skill is going to be something that we need to educate people on. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different types of work, and it's hard to study them all as one field. So that's one thing. And then I guess the other thing I've been thinking about is that, and that we've seen particularly in the pandemic, is that humans, we have to acknowledge our own needs and our limitations. And one of our needs is social interaction. And the more we're automating things and having algorithms do things and working more remotely, which allows for people to, people who are all over the world can do all kinds of jobs, but we're becoming more and more disconnected. And so how do we stay connected to other humans? And that our connection to other humans is important just for our own individual needs, but also as a society. And as we think about all these problems that are coming up, if we're not connected to the other humans, we're gonna really deteriorate some of the social fabric. So.
Thank you. Max, burning issues.
Burning issues. Well, so you're also talking about the people that are interesting to study, and I kind of think it's a bit related. The people I find super interesting to study, and I try not to just realize this is me, but it's the people who have somewhat like agency and control over like their work, I guess, when they can decide I could work differently, or I could manage my own time, I could manage my own cognitive effort. And I think that's exciting to look at because that's the most extreme case of where people have lots of control over themselves and would benefit the most from looking at it. So lots of the other types of people you could study have got quite controlled jobs, and those controlled jobs are quite already like closely measured and examined for performance, when like breaks are set at certain times when people have to do it in a factory. So I feel like you can learn from studying one where there's full flexibility to then have this opposite tension, which is really affecting, I think, how we can design technology, which is when work is so constrained in certain environments, maybe just because that type of work needs to be constrained that way. So one thing I think is interesting is that, yeah, that full tension is a burning topic. What types of work can really benefit from understanding that way, or which ones wouldn't benefit so much, because it doesn't matter if they're going to get tired, they have to get tired in order to make the job work. I think the other two really current issues are, and they act as opposing forces, are kind of, what is it we're exactly trying to measure about people in order to be able to, for them to help themselves a bit more, if things are going to get more cognitive. There's a whole, those people are kind of, oh, we've tried to measure stress on people, and we've used this technology to measure it, and we found a difference. And then someone says, we've tried to measure mental workload, and we've used the same technology and found the same difference. And someone else says, we've tried to measure vigilance, and we've used the same measure and found the same difference. And it's that whole area of what it is exactly that's happening in the brain when people do work, I think is lots of people looking at the same problem with different words. So a big question, and I don't know who would solve it. Maybe it's psychology people, or maybe it's going to be part of HCI, but that understanding of what really happens to people when they go through hard work, busy work, get tired in such a way that, you know, your watch would be able to spot it. That type of insight into what really happens, I think, will start to become more and more pressing. But then at the same time, as we enable technology to do that, the opposite, which I think some people have mentioned, is the ethics side of it, which we've started to talk to people about, where, you know, when the company says, you know, it says at the moment, according to your data, that you're not thinking very hard to do your job. You should be thinking harder. Is that true, or should people be thinking less if they're good at their job? There's a whole future interpretation of what different states about people will mean, and whether it's good or bad. And a lot of the default assumptions are that high stress levels are bad, or high effort levels are bad. But actually, you want high effort and stress to achieve something, you know, difficult and worthy to achieve. It feels like you've been successful. So I think there's going to be this whole mess of when people measure things, they'll start saying that's bad, and then actually it's not bad. It's just the default assumption. And those two key issues are just gonna somewhere, you know, as we start evaluating people's work, people are going to make wrong assumptions, and there's going to be messy measures and analyses. And I think it's going to take a long time for that to evolve out, so it becomes normal to judge people that kind of way. It also means that we've got to get different types of researchers together, because it's going to be machine learning people that accurately figure out what state someone is in from data in the future. Because I can run an experiment very controlled, but when it gets noisy, it will be the same people that figured out how to measure steps from your phone data that eventually figure out how to know if someone's working hard mentally. But then you need the ethics people and the legal considerations to really understand what impact it's going to have to analyze those things, because they're so very different to other physiological measures, so much more personal and invasive, that starting to make judgments about people's mental effort or mental workload is quite, invasive, I think. And then it's all going to be HCI personal informatics that kind of glues all this together. So I don't see a way that any one of those groups is really going to solve it. They're more likely just to, make an advance that spurs everyone else into panic. So hopefully we can get a coordinated group of people eventually to consider this about the future of work.
Thank you. Thank you for these thoughtful responses. Sorry, did I cut off someone? Okay.
I'd like to take us back to 2006, and I'd like to tell the story of how this project came to be.
Okay. So what I would like to say is, again, thank you to the technical program chairs. I'm really very much looking forward to the coming, several months of conversations with their guests. And what we're going to be doing throughout the year is having these conversations for about a half hour, and then recorded, and then we're going to stop recording and go on to about a half hour of unrecorded conversations, which can either be about the future of work or whatever it is that we choose to talk about. So what I would recommend we do right now is to stop the recorded part of the conversation and then move on to sort of more of a social event. Does that sound good, Orit? I think Orit says yes.
Yes, this sounds good. Yes, this sounds good. And I'm also really looking forward to really the agenda of conversations that we heard our kind of technical program chairs laying out here by recognizing the pressing issues. We will have another conversation next week. So come back next week, Thursday at 11. We will announce it soon. And meanwhile, I think we can turn off the recordings.